So what I have here is a Manco Thunderbird that I have modified, and I've been getting a lot of questions on it, so I figured I'd make a quick video on what are the modifications I've done and what did I do to make them work. So quickly, this is like I said, a Manco Thunderbird. This one came with a 4 horsepower Subaru engine, and it came with originally these wheels, and it came with one of those terrible wheel brakes. So kind of long story short, I was not happy with these brakes. They're really not that great, especially if it rains or if it's muddy. They're almost even dangerous, especially if you want to upgrade your motor or put a torque converter or something like that on there. It's just really not sufficient to stop it. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to put a Predator motor on here and a torque converter, and I wanted to have better front and rear brakes. So I happened to have this Panterra 50cc dirt bike lying around that had a dead motor in it, and so I just went ahead and gave it a shot to see if the front and rear tires would fit, and they ended up fitting. So if you want to know what size those are, these are the sizes of the front and rear wheels that came off that Panterra 50cc dirt bike. I believe Baja purchased the company, and then maybe another company purchased it from Baja. So I've seen these sold as Baja and something else. I don't remember the name. I'm not sure if they kept the same wheels on it, but that's the wheels that came with it on the one that I have. So the first thing I did was I removed the brake. I had to cut it with a grinder. There was no other way around it. That's how it worked. And it was held on by these brackets. You can see one here. There's another one on the other side. I didn't see any other way around it other than cutting those brackets, which I didn't want to do, so I ended up just cutting that instead. I have no use for it. I don't plan on using it in the future, so that was okay with me. So the first trick was to figure out if these wheels would fit. So after removing the foot brake, the rear tire went on almost perfectly. The only issue I had was the axle girth was a little thinner than the original axles. And so what I did was I got this spacer here from Ace Hardware, and I just cut off a piece with a grinder and stuck it in the frame there. I didn't weld it or anything. I just literally put it there and kind of put some washers on each end to keep it in place. And that seemed to do the job. As far as spacers go, this is the only spacer. These are the spacers that were on the Panterra. So the only thing I did was I added these two washers here. Other than that, it almost fit perfectly. Seems like the wheel well is a slightly larger on this mini bike than it was on the Panterra, but other than that, it fit very well. If you're familiar with drum brakes, they have to be mounted so that they stay in place. And of course, on the dirt bike, it had a mount right there and something on the frame that it attached to. And on this one, didn't have that. So what I did was I had this extra piece of steel lying around. I cut it, drilled some holes in it, and bent it like this so that it would work. And it works perfectly on there. Now on the dirt bike, it had a foot brake for the rear brake, you know, like a typical dirt bike, and which had a bar that would engage the brake. So I thought about doing that, you know, but I don't have a welder, so it would have just been impossible. So what I did was I just got a lever and a brake cable that goes on a Trailmaster NB200. I believe it's the same one that goes on a Baja Warrior as well. It's a little longer because the bike is bigger, so what I did was I just wrapped it around here and kind of ran it underneath and back to here. Now again, I don't have a welder, so this is the only thing I could do that I could think of to mount this cable to keep it in place here. Now on the Trailmaster and probably on the Baja Warriors, they have this thing right here that's, you know, part of the frame that holds that in place. If I had a welder, that's probably the better thing to do, and maybe in the future I might do that, but for now this is what I got, and it seems to be working right now. I don't have any issues with it. The front wheel was a little more difficult in some ways. The axle is a lot thinner than the hole provided on the frame. So if I had a welder, what I would like to have done is take a the size of this is 3/8. I would like to take in a 3/8 washer like this one, put one here, do the same thing on the other fork, and weld it to the frame to do that. Didn't have that, so I did the same thing. I used this washer, or this spacer, cut out a piece, put it inside there, and hold it in place with the washers. There's still a little play in it. I would like to get it a little bit tighter. This was the only spacer they really had that would work at my local hardware store. Maybe you can find something that's a little thicker, so it kind of gives you that 3/8 hole that you're needing. But other than that, it fit fairly well. Again, I just used the same spacers that were on the Panterra, and I just added these 2 washers on this side just to make it fit a little better. The other thing was the original axle stuck out to about here. It was a lot longer. So again, I went to the hardware store, got a 3/8, not really an axle, but it's a grade 5 steel bolt or axle or whatever you want to call it, and it's 7 inches long, and that fits more normally. It doesn't stick out to here and look funny. But other than that, it worked fairly well. Probably the biggest challenge was the brake. The nice part was it came with the cable, comes with the lever, so I literally just took it right off the Panterra and stuck it on here. The biggest challenge was mounting the drum brake itself. Now on the Panterra, it has this piece right here that's built into the front fork, and what that does is it holds the drum brake in place, because they cannot move around with the wheel. They have to be held in place for them to work. Now obviously on this bike it didn't have front brakes, so it didn't have anything like that. If I had a welder, I would have just welded something like that's on there onto here, but I didn't have that. So what I did was I got a grade 8 steel bolt and drilled a hole in the frame and stuck it in there, and that's what is used to keep the drum brake in place. So far it works great. I've even gone up to as fast as 50 miles an hour and slammed the brakes, just to make sure it would hold in place, and it's been fine. I'm not worried about the bolt breaking. I think the frame might break before the bolt will. One thing I do notice that I'm not crazy about is when you do hit the brakes, this tends to move the fork a little bit, which kind of moves that a little bit. I don't really know what else I can do about that, but it kind of is what it is. And as of right now, I haven't had any problems, so I'm just going to kind of keep it the way it is for now. Other than that, I replaced the handlebars. Just the other ones are kind of beat up looking. Just got these aluminum ones from eBay. Went ahead and got a new throttle cable. These other ones were just kind of all beat up, the grips and the throttle cable. And I put this Predator motor on here, as you can see. And this particular Predator motor, I removed the governor, and it has, I believe, 22-pound valve springs on it. The stock exhaust will not work, the one that's on the Predator. It just hits the frame, so it just doesn't fit. So I happen to have this muffler lying around. This is off a first generation Trailmaster MB200, and it seemed to work perfect. I just like the way it looks too. And then I have, of course, your Chinese Series 30 clone torque converter. Now, I don't know if you're not familiar with Baja Thunderbirds. They have a gas tank, a real gas tank, so you don't need the gas tank on the motor, so I took that off. Another challenge that I had was because of the torque converter, it would hit against the frame, so I had to lift the engine pretty high to make this work. I don't really know how many washers I have there, but it's a lot, and those are either 5 grade or 8 grade steel washers, and I have a rubber one on the bottom there just to kind of help with vibration. So all 4 mounts have that, and as you can see, I had to raise it up pretty high so that it would work. Without doing that, the pulley on the torque converter was touching the frame, and it's at a place where there's nothing you can do about it. You can't cut that out of the frame, or you won't have a mini bike anymore. So the only thing I could do was raise the motor, and so far I haven't had any problems with it. I went ahead and also I changed the bolts because they had to be longer, and I went with grade 8 steel on that as well, just to make sure that they would stay in place. And that's pretty much it for this. I'm really happy with it. It rides great. It's actually a wheelie machine. This is the original rear sprocket, which is huge. I don't know how many teeth that is. I don't even know what it is, but it's humongous. Probably, it's over 60. This is the sprocket that came on the Panterra, and it's the exact same chain, size chain. I can't remember, either 410 or 420, whatever that is. Again, it's the same one that's on a Trailmaster, MB200, or a Baja Warrior. So this particular Thunderbird had that same size chain anyways. Now obviously that chain didn't fit. I had to cut it down a bit. But other than that, it fits perfectly. I didn't know if this would work or not as far as the torque, since the sprocket is so small, but it works excellent. And not only that, it still does wheelies when you're starting off, even with that tiny rear sprocket. So if I were to leave this baby on, it would just be, you wouldn't even be able to ride it. So I'm super happy with it. I have been over 50 miles an hour on it. It probably goes at least an additional 10 miles per hour, but I just really haven't had the space. I'm in my neighborhood and I don't want to like make all my neighbors hate me, so I didn't want to go too much faster. But I like the bike a lot. I get a lot of fun out of it. Just trying to think anything else here. These are the stock fenders. I didn't replace those. They fit perfectly with these new wheels. I think that's pretty much it as far as upgrades to this. So hopefully this helps somebody.